Goal setting is a spiritual responsibility. So here's Philippians 3. It says this, I know that I'm not yet what God wants me to be. How many knows that, right? I haven't reached that goal, but I keep pressing towards that mark in order to make it mine that Christ has made for me. I haven't reached my goal, but there's one thing I do. I forget what is past, and I reach forward for what is ahead. I keep my eyes focused on the goal so that I may one day win that prize that Christ has called me to receive in the life to come. All of you who are spiritually mature, say it with me, all who are spiritually mature should have this mind. So the Bible's talking a lot about goals right here. Now, Paul ultimately is talking about the goal that we follow and become like Christ. So here's the first goal of our lives, is that we become like Jesus. How? Means we start wearing robes and sandals? No, that's not what it means to be like Jesus. It means that we become like Jesus in our nature. We become like Jesus in our heart through the Spirit. We become like Jesus in our mindset, in the way that we think. Right? This is how we are. And we become like Jesus in the actions that we have, or better yet, as sonship and daughtership. One of the things that Jesus modeled is he modeled what it means to be a son before the Father. And you can play the same thing into that, ladies. It can mean Jesus modeled what it means to be a daughter before the Father. Right? The son can do nothing unless he's told. I'm on my Father's business. I'm on my Father's agenda. I do what the Spirit tells me. He's modeling that for us because he's God. That's another story. I'm not going to get into all that. But nonetheless, that's the model. So when we become like Christ, it means that we relate to our Father as Jesus would have us to. That we're sons and daughters before our Father. And that means the way that our heart is, our nature is, what God wants from us on the internal world, and the way that we think and perceive things. And that's another story. So this is what God wants, but Paul's talking about goals here. He's talking about set the goal, move towards the goal, reach for the goal. Don't worry about anything else. Say this, everyone ends up somewhere. Few end up there on purpose. You're going to end up somewhere, and you get to decide if you're going to end up there on purpose. Say this, I will either set the course of my life. Come on, help me out. Don't be the 95%. Come on. I will either set the course of my life, or it will be set for me. Say this, I will either define my life, or it will be defined for me. The idea that God's going to do whatever God's going to do that's not true. Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? This is the idea. Either you're going to define the direction of your life, or people with more ambitious goals are going to define them for you. That's a fact. I tell people even in relationships, I'm like, you have to define the relationship. You either define the terms of the relationship, or one or both parties, or somebody in that relationship is going to define it. So you've got to define the relationship as to what it is. You've got to define your life, or it will be defined for you. So it's ultimately to be like Jesus. You got to take a hard look at your life and find out areas that are not in sync. I'm not going to get into that. So one of the things that goals do is that goals create faith. Goal setting is a spiritual responsibility, and goals create faith. Why? Because if you create a goal, that goal creates risk. You now must take a risk. And if you take a risk, that risk requires faith, and faith pleases God. Does this make sense? All right, so I'm not even going to talk financially. I'll use the same one I used in first service. If my goal for the year is to have a better relationship with my wife, if my goal for the year is to have a better relationship with my marriage, it's going to cost me something. I'm going to have to risk, right? Men, you're going to have to risk. I have to risk vulnerability, and I have to risk intimacy. Now, let's just say I've been taking advantage of her and not truly valuing her for who she is for a period of time. And now all of a sudden, I've had this revelation and I have this goal that I'm going to be a different person. Now I have to risk my vulnerability, and I have to start treating her differently or talking to her differently. Well, most likely what's going to happen is she's going to be in shock and awe at that. She's not going to trust me, and she's going to start firing a few arrows at me. You know? And so what I'm supposed to do, and I can either react to the arrows that she just fired at me, or I can pull the arrows out and I can go back and risk again, because this is my goal. So when you have a goal, it's going to require risk. Risk in a relational sense. When men want to change their marriages or their work, they have to change themselves. This is another point that I think needs to be repeated. Oftentimes, especially in relationships, is that men are looking for the woman to change. She's not going to change. The odds are you have to change. God always begins with the man. It doesn't mean that the woman's right at all. That doesn't mean that. He begins with the dude. Why? Because women tend to be responders and women tend to be amplifiers. Now, until this person changes, nothing's going to change in my environment. Until I change, nothing's going to change. So if a man is married to a woman and he gives her trouble, she's going to amplify that trouble. Many a time in my life, I've said to myself, why did I say that? But if you give her love, she's going to amplify the love. This is what happens. And I see it even with my wife, and I'll take the opportunity to publicly, because she's sitting right there. So I have to take you've got to score points where you can, guys. So this is the idea. It's like I'll take the opportunity, like even the things is like I've been trying to tell her, like I've been taking it, I take you for granted. Now, it's not like I take her for granted all the time, but I have been taking her for granted. I'm not seeing the value, recently. I wouldn't say overall. It's not been like we wouldn't be married if that was the case. But like I haven't been really understanding the value that she brings into my life or the love that she gives to me, and I haven't been doing that. So I have to tell her that, like, look, I've taken you for granted. I'm sorry, and I'm wrong. But in order for that to happen, I have to risk vulnerability, and I have to allow her to basically maybe even vent to me the anger that she feels at the way that I haven't treated her right. She's like, well, I'm glad you've come to this conclusion. I've only been saying this for 6 months, and I've got to deal with that, and I've got to be willing to take the responsibility in order to achieve that goal. Is that the goal that I want? Yes, that's the goal that I want. But when I give her love, she amplifies it, and she takes care of me in way more ways than, I've told her before, I'm embarrassed because she loves me more than I can love, and it's like just the way that she expresses love, because women are amplifiers. Well, I don't understand why she freaks out so bad, because you're giving her trouble, bro. She amplifies, right? She's got issues. Yeah, she may have issues, but she's also an amplifier. Why don't you give her some good instead of giving her trouble? Why don't you give her some love instead of giving her trouble and let her amplify that? That's how God's created the woman. Ladies, you all know that. You love like here. He loves here, and you're like here. When the woman feels she's loved, she just goes. When she feels like she's hurt or disrespected, it's not even disrespect, or unloved. This is what drives women crazy. Unloved. That is a very unloving thing. So that's the point. But my point is if my goal is to do that, then I have to risk. You understand? If my goal is to make more money, I have to, we can go down that lane, but that wasn't the lane I chose to go down today. I wanted to go down that one because I think people can relate to that a little bit more.